Welcome to Small Biz Flash, the briefing for owners and managers on small business news, trends, and insights to make better decisions and increase their business's value. I'm your host, Adam Hewitt. Thanks for joining me. Before we get to this week's topic, I wanted to let you know that I'll be co-hosting an event called Illuminate 2023 on Tuesday, February 7th in the perimeter area of Metro Atlanta, and I would love for you to join me and the other small business specialists that will be there. Illuminate will be a time to gather with fellow owners and managers for great ideas, insightful talks, facilitated networking, and even a bit of fun. So for more information, go to the link in the show notes. Okay, so this week we're continuing our multi-part series on surviving the economic downturn by discussing the crucially important topic of cash flow. One survey last year by Viably found that only 45% of small business owners reviewed cash flow statements. Another by Wave found that 57% have less than $5,000 set aside for a financial crisis, and that is scary. Those are bad statistics, so today we'll be getting some expert advice from a special guest, Jonathan Bill, the owner of SBS Accounting Advisors, the show's sponsor, and Jonathan will also be one of the co-hosts at Illuminate 2023. That's all coming up right after the news roundup. All right, let's dive in. The economic news is mixed again this week. In the good column, the Producer Price Index, a wholesale measure of inflation, dropped 0.5% in December, beating experts' predictions. It continues a trend of slowing inflation and has observers hopeful that the Federal Reserve will slow down on interest rate hikes. Compared to last December, the PPI was up 6.2%, the lowest level since early 2021. In the bad column, retail sales fell significantly in December by 1.1%, the largest in a year. It was the second month in a row of declining sales, perhaps fueled in part by those higher interest rates affecting credit card purchases. Industrial production was also down 0.7% in December, much more than predicted. Capacity utilization in the industrial sector fell to 78.8% in December. 2022 was a very big year for new entrepreneurs. According to the US Census Bureau, a whopping 5 million Americans filed new business applications last year. Only 2021 exceeded that number when 5.4 million applications were completed. The pandemic saw a huge surge in the number of new businesses, and the Great Resignation seems to be fueling the continued growth. Most small businesses already have a Google Business Profile account to ensure they are accurately listed in Google Maps and enabling them to get Google reviews, thus ranking higher in Google searches. Now, Apple has announced Apple Business Connect, allowing businesses to verify and edit their listing information and to add photos on apps such as Maps and Messages, as well as information used by Siri. You can find more information on this and other stories in the news roundup by going to the links in the show notes. Small business owners, your finances are the cornerstone of your business. You need the bookkeeping pros at SBS Accounting Advisors to keep your AP, AR, and financial statements on track. For 16 years, the good folks at SBS have been helping owners like you make better decisions and grow their profits. So go to sbsaccountants.com today to set up a free 30-minute consultation. Use the promo code FLASH to get 20% off your setup fee. Again, that's sbsaccountants.com. Today on the show, we have Jonathan Bill with us from SBS Accounting Advisors. You may recognize that name. SBS is the sponsor of the show, so I'm very excited to have Jonathan with us. Jonathan, welcome to Small Biz Flash.
Thank you, Adam. It's an honor to be on the show with you, and I've enjoyed listening to it up to this point. So it's just an honor to be able to actually be on the show with you.
Well, thank you. And folks, I I paid him just a little bit to say that. So, well, Jonathan, so today we're going to be talking about how to never run out of cash. And I've got a few questions prepared, and we're just going to jump right into it. So, obviously we're in this kind of mode where we don't really know what the economy is going to do in 2023, but a lot of small business owners are concerned about possibly a recession or an economic downturn. So can you talk to us for just a second about why cash is king when we're in this mode where we might be entering a recession?
Sure. Well, cash is the lifeblood of a business. And without it, you can't keep your obligations. You can have a lot of good things going for your business, and we'll talk more about that here in a minute. But if you don't have cash, you can run aground. But in a positive light, cash really enables you to have time to react and to even proactively look at your options. So if there were to be a downturn in your income, or God forbid, you were to lose all your customers in a day, which we had a client that happened during COVID. Thankfully, she's been able to rebuild her business. But if you have cash, then you can think about how can I strategically pivot, or what are my options, and you don't have to make this quick reactionary decision. But also it empowers you to take advantage of opportunities that people might otherwise not be able to take advantage of. So there might be a piece of real estate or another business that is going out of business because they didn't have cash, maybe one of your competitors, and you could buy it for a song because you have cash and you have those options.
That's great, Jonathan. And I think that a lot of, especially, startup folks make that mistake of, thinking maybe revenue equals cash. And I was actually just reading a really interesting article in Harvard Business Review about a startup that had a, potentially a really good business model, but they couldn't quite survive enough business cycles to make it, and they ran out of cash. So, to your point, what are some common mistakes that entrepreneurs and small business owners make when it comes to thinking about cash flow?
Right. Well, you just mentioned one of them, and that is profit versus cash flow. So many entrepreneurs, maybe they may not have gone to college, or if they did go, they didn't get a degree in finance. And so they have to figure it all out. And so in their mind, hey, if I'm profitable, then I shouldn't go out of business. I'm okay. And so that kind of thinking can get them into quicksand fast. So profit is something totally different than cash flow. Profit is simply your sales, whether collected or not, minus your expenses, whether paid or not. Cash flow is how much you have available to operate by. And so cash flow, it takes into account the timing of receivables and payables, where once again, just looking at your profit, say on an income statement, does not. So there are businesses, like we were talking about, that were profitable, but they had to actually close their doors because they ran out of cash. And so that's really the first mistake, and maybe one of the biggest mistakes, is equating profit with cash. And so you can't do that. You got to see them as two separate things.
And Jonathan, I would just interrupt real quick. I would imagine, especially right now, that receivables are probably slowing down for a lot of folks as the economy worsens, as their customers are kind of getting frightened and trying to slow that time frame down some.
Yes. So exactly, you could be just as profitable today as you were a year ago, and yet because of the slowing down of receivables, your cash is slowing down, and your bank balance could be going south. So important to be tracking cash flow, and that really is the second thing that I would say is a common mistake is entrepreneurs tend to run their business by what they see in online banking, and they just look at that bank balance, say, hey, I'm good to go ahead and make that purchase or whatever, and they're not doing any formal kind of tracking of what their true cash flow number is. Those bills that need to be paid, and they're not looking at things like checks that may not have cleared, and so they're not taking into account all of those kinds of things. So a cash flow projection is really different than a budget or forecast. So you might have one of those as an entrepreneur, but you really need to build a cash flow projection, which is looking at your payables and the timing of those. And so you can have a very simple one that you do in Excel, but there's also apps out there that you can use that can automate it, and it can allow you to actually kind of move things around. Say, well, if I was to collect this faster or slower, how does that impact my cash flow? It can actually give you a heat map, so you can see exactly what days you're going to be low on cash. So the key is that you have a tool and that you use it regularly. So if it's too complicated, where you stop using it, then you need to figure something out where you have something that you can use and keep up to date regularly.
Okay. Most businesses use accrual-based accounting, but that doesn't always paint the correct picture because of the fact that it doesn't take into account the cash flow.
Exactly. The timing of the receivables and payables. Exactly. So you could, collect on an invoice that, for revenue that you had on your profit and loss statement for months ago. You could collect on that in the current month, or you could pay, on a bill that, you had recorded as an expense a couple months ago. And so it just, once again, you've got to have a system that takes into account those variables.
All right, we're going to stop the interview there for the sake of time, and we'll pick back up next week, beginning with the question of how many months of operating cash a company needs to have on hand. Thanks for listening to Small Biz Flash. I'm your host, Adam Hewitt. If you enjoy the show, please help me to expand its reach by telling one other person about the podcast. I sure do appreciate it, and I'll see you next week.